On the morning of October 6, 2002, the Roman Catholic nuns cut the chain securing a nuclear missile site in northeastern Colorado and entered. They hammered on a 110-ton concrete lid covering the Minuteman III missile silo. They poured their own blood in the shape of crosses from plastic baby bottles. They sang and they prayed for peace.
The Spirit of God kind of led us together about what is going on. There's going to be war in Iraq.
The rash weapons of mass destruction are controlled by a murderous tyrant.
We're going to massively kill people. You know, the president is threatening to use these nuclear weapons.
We cannot wait for the final proof. The smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
We cannot anymore think that this is the way we're going to solve the problems on the planet.
So then they took it upon themselves in their religious fervor to start destroying public property. What's the difference between them and a terrorist?
We have become a warrior nation.
What's the difference between them and Timothy McVeigh?
You know, this was just a symbol. I mean, this was a symbolic disarmament action because the United
I hope
States,
we never disarm. God forbid if we do.
See, there's 14. That's not it, is it? I think it is.
We're getting close.
See, I see the fence up on the hill. That's it.
Right up here.
Yeah,
Right
that's the
straight
site.
ahead.
Yeah. Where you see that fence up there. It is.
Revisiting the crime scene. And it's still a crime scene.
On October 6th, we took a little tiny step and a little tiny walk for peace.
We donned our white Tyvek suits that said disarmament specialists on the front. And on the back, CWIT, Citizen Weapons Inspection Team.
We did a liturgy at the N8 Minuteman III missile silo.
We cut the link in the chain to the cattle gate.
Where did they get a bolt cutters? These are nuns. We clipped one link. So they went to the hardware store and they bought a bolt cutter.
Clipped it, opened this up.
Well, they just cut the gate chain, so they never really cut the fence. Okay.
But we cut this one last link so that they could just link it up again if they wanted.
Our Creator, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come.
We were trying to inspect, expose, and symbolically disarm these weapons of mass destruction.
Carol and I read this book when we were in jail. It's called Hell, Healing, and Resistance. And it's in the words of the people who fought in all the wars, the different wars from World War I on. And we could only read one story at a time because it was that tragic. And we would sit there, remember, Carol, we would cry because we could not handle the next story until we absorbed this one. And all these people that are in this book, Hell, Healing, and Resistance, they've all become peacemakers. Beautiful, beautiful stories. Our faith leads us to act against war, to act against the illegal criminal actions of our government, which had to do with war being imminent, the threatening to use this weapon of mass destruction on God's people, and the fact that this Minuteman III was on high trigger alert.
No one knows that we live on hair trigger alert, the edge of the nuclear abyss, every second of every day. Every second of every day.
If this weapon is ever ordered to be used by our president, it cannot be called back. It does not distinguish between men, women, and children. It kills not only people within a 50 square mile radius, but Mother Earth herself, the species, the trees, anything living will never be the same.
We fail to appreciate just how astonishingly, just unbelievably destructive nuclear weapons are.
Out to 5 miles from the epicenter, everyone's literally vaporized, turned into gas. Out to 20 miles, everyone is shockingly burnt and turned into missiles traveling at 100 miles an hour through the air.
And once we know that, and we do all know those things, and a whole lot more that we wish we didn't know, once we know those things, what is our responsibility? Can life go on as usual?
Well, this whole corridor from Cheyenne, Wyoming, where the missile commanders are, on down through Colorado, right down to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where they have storage of nuclear weaponry in the mountains there at Kirtland Air Force Base. So it's like a whole corridor of nuclear and space involvement.
The Minuteman III is an offensive weapon. It is first strike.
We have some 500 of the Minuteman IIIs. The smaller of the warheads has a yield of 170 kilotons. A kiloton is the equivalent of 1,000 tons of TNT. To give that some perspective, the Oklahoma City bomb was roughly a ton of explosives. And so 1,000 times that is a kiloton. The small ones have a yield of 170 kilotons, which is roughly 10 times the size of the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima.
This is a Minuteman III missile. Colorado has 49 of them. We were at 1 and 8.
I am the caretaker of the ground for an estate that the base sits upon. I don't have anything to do with the missile bases. They're there. I can go in there if I wanted to.
Sure.
I don't.
Right. Oh, you never go near the
I don't. No, I don't bother.
Now,
I don't want to set off all that stuff. I'm just a farm girl sitting out here.
It's been here 40-some years. I don't know what the stink is now. Just a bunch of nuts out here causing trouble.
Are you citizens of Colorado?
No.
You're citizens somewhere?
Oh, yeah, Maryland.
All right.
Yeah.
As I told the sisters, those bases have no heart. They have no mind. They're not going to talk back to you. They're not going to say a thing. And so what are these people really going to be accomplishing?
We never use the term successful. Those are terms that the culture uses, the business community uses. Was it a success? We speak in terms of, were we faithful? Were we faithful to what the nonviolent Jesus calls us to? Were we faithful to the beliefs that we have? Were we faithful to the children? Are we faithful to the 7th generation?
I have felt incredibly blessed that Ardith and Jackie and Carol are my sisters. Incredibly honored to be part of the same congregation.
We're Dominicans, and so we're order of preachers. Our charism is veritas, which is truth. And so as Dominicans, we attempt to preach the word of truth wherever we find ourselves.
I think they're very strong women. They have truly preached by their way of life.
They are also scholars and students of
Catholic social teachings, of political policy, of nuclear war. This action that took place 2 years ago didn't start 2.5 years ago.
Oh, no.
It started 20 years ago.
Early in the 70s, artists had already crossed the lines to many military bases.
The sisters were doing this all the time, breaking and entering different places. These three?
No, they've done this for their entire lives.
They were not the first ones arrested. I mean, they're the ones that have been arrested the most, but they weren't the first.
For me, what we do in our actions through the years, decades now of years, I think they all speak such a beautiful truth.
As we saw the sincerity with which Jackie, Carol, and Ardith were living this life, and the absolute congruence between what they said and what they did, their simplicity of life, the way they lived the vows, the way they lived the gospel, we came to recognize that they, along with anybody else, has to live their conscience.
I think that Jesus was radical. I think that Gandhi was radical. I think if we look at the cloud of witnesses, the people who have gone before us, they are considered radical. I don't consider radical a bad word.
Our protection is in the life that we lead and living a life of our call to be people of God.
I don't want children someday saying, why didn't you do anything? How could you be complicit? How could you allow our world to get to the state it's in? Where were people? Weren't they doing anything? Well, they were shopping and they were doing this, that, and the other thing. I can't live my life that way.
This is the ultimate spiritual question. Will we or will we not destroy God's creation?
These ladies are not just making comments about nuclear proliferation. These ladies are making comments about the fact that America has a war machine and that it has power and it uses that power.
Every time we participate in war and killing, we commit extreme immoral acts.
This is the World Prayer Center that was built for the largest united prayer effort in the history of the world. And it was for the purpose of praying for the most needy and the darkest countries of the world. Hey, how was worship today?
Wonderful as usual.
Good, good. It is wise for those who represent the people of America to listen to a group that has a membership of 23 million and speaks for 47 million. And we're going to do all that we can to prayer walk and siege Washington, D.C., not as political activists, but as people that will open the door for the Spirit of God more and more in the executive branch, and the Supreme Court, and the legislative branch. George Bush is a Bible-believing Christian, just like Bill Clinton was. And so because of it, he has some interests that we have as well. And now after the Cold War, we are, without a doubt, the only world superpower. And all over the world, we're doing all we can to protect civil liberties, to promote free markets, to encourage other governments to give economic opportunity to their own people. There's a lot of responsibility when you're the world's only superpower. Right here's the World Prayer Center, and then you see just off to the right there's the stadium for the Air Force Academy, and then up above it is the chapel and where the classrooms are and things like that. That's the Air Force Academy. And then right over here to the left is NORAD, where the mountain range comes to an end and it dips down. Under that mountain, it's solid granite, is NORAD, and that's where they're watching the Earth all the time to make sure there's not a launch against the United States or any of its allies. And so those military installations being here, along with all of these Christian ministries, they work hand in glove.
Our Father,
I pledge allegiance
who art in heaven,
to the flag,
hallowed be your name.
of the United States of America.
Your kingdom come, your will be done,
and to the
republic for which it stands,
on earth as it is in heaven.
one nation, under God,
Give us this day our daily bread.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Many of our military folk, they really feel they're doing a service. They don't feel they're sacrificing. They're doing a service. And I guess I'm more in sync with them in what I'm doing and feeling that I am doing a service for the people of the world, and especially the children that are coming up in this culture, to try to create a change.
You bring great pride to the people of the United States of America.
Why do people celebrate when men go over to battlefields and kill, and then think that we won't have as much of a gift to give by giving our lives for peace?
You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you.
This is the International Peace House, and it's a place where people come to respite, to share their ideas on war and peace, to share their stories, to continue to grow, as to who we are and what we can be in order to make a better world for future generations.
People come from all over. Some of them come and have no church background at all. Other people come from a variety of different denominations. This is an interdenominational church.
Hi. People come from every perspective. We have people who have different faiths. We worship on Sunday together.
Well, actually, it's kind of like a rally. It's from some people's minds, if they're from a more formal background, it's a little bit like a rally, because the music, we use hymns and we use choruses, and then we just have very simple Bible teaching.
And, some people have no institutional connection at all, and there are many Christians.
We are strongly Christian. And so what that means is we highlight the necessity of knowing Jesus in a personal way, the Jesus that is taught in the Scriptures.
The religious right in this country have an entirely different interpretation. And I guess the way I can describe it best is the Jesus that they follow is not the Jesus that I know and that is a part of my life.
I'm just convinced that we are all part of the loving, nonviolent circle, the family of God, and that we are one body, one blood, and that we must learn how to live on planet Earth together.
They don't understand why you need a military to protect freedom, because they think they just don't understand both the Scriptures and they don't understand human nature. But it does take force to protect peace.
A few years ago, the threat during the Cold War seemed kind of imminent. And as you remember, children were afraid of it, and all those kind of things were happening. We were preparing to save ourselves and protect ourselves from the nuclear holocaust that was going to happen.
That signal means to stop whatever you are doing and get to the nearest safe place fast. Duck and cover. Here's Tony going to his Cub Scout meeting. Tony knows the bomb can explode any time of the year, day or night. He is ready for it. Duck and cover. Atta boy, Tony. That flash means act fast.
We're still using the Cold War as a baseline from which to measure our nuclear forces. Okay? Even though the Cold War is over, it's irrelevant. We should not be measuring how many nuclear forces we have based on reductions. We should say, okay, if we had 0 nuclear weapons tomorrow, how many should we build? That's how we should look at our nuclear weapons.
This threat of a nuclear Armageddon that was going to have the whole America destroyed in in a spasm with the Soviet Union. That's over. And the chance of that is now mercifully small. The chance of a single nuclear weapon going off on American soil is greater today than it was at the height of the Cold War.
If you look at public opinion polls and ask people how many nuclear weapons do you think that we have, the numbers are a tenth of what we actually have, or less. Most people think that when the Cold War ended, that problem just simply went away. I guess that nuclear weapons just sort of evaporated or something. I don't know what they think.
We processed up, we did the same thing on that chain up there.
And the same thing, clipped one of those links.
And then we opened wide the gate, hung our banner, Sacred Earth and Space Plowshares to 2002.
A Plowshares action takes its inspiration from the passage in the book of Isaiah in the Hebrew Scriptures.
They shall hammer their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against another nation, nor shall they train for war anymore.
It's breathtakingly simple in its idea, a Plowshares action. People involved in an action go to a weapons facility. In the case of Carol and Ardith and Jackie, they went to a silo, taking with them the spirit of the gospel, their own blood, and a hammer, in order to literally to beat on whatever there is being addressed.
We took our simple household hammers and we began to hammer on the tracks. We began to hammer on the top of the missile silo lid as an act of breaking our complicity, if these weapons are ever used, that we can say, not in my name.
And some religious fanatics get a hammer in their hand or get a weapon in their hand and start to express their own views contrary to the will of the people.
110-ton concrete lid. Our action was clearly symbolic.
We walked over to the silo lid and we began a liturgy of prayers.
Then they did something that I think is appalling.
We poured our blood out of baby bottles in the form of crosses.
So we go to the top of that missile silo lid, and we take out our blood, which was drawn professionally for us by doctor friends, and in baby bottles because children had the least to say about what goes on.
They took their own blood and they marked on the silo. Then they had a liturgy out there. That's blasphemy.
Blood is what flows through our veins. It's what gives us life. Blood for us is very Eucharistic. Jesus poured out his life. He gave his life. We would rather give our lives than have people's blood shed in our name.
We're praying while we're doing this. We're saying, our mantra. So let's say our mantra.
Oh God,
teach us how to be peacemakers in a hostile world. Oh God, teach us how to be peacemakers in a hostile world.
We could have charged them with trespassing, and there would have been another misdemeanor. And they could have gone to trial and said, oh, we got convicted of another misdemeanor. Well, maybe they'll think twice next time.
There was 2 charges.
They're charged with damaging government property.
Damaging federal property.
With the intent to obstruct the national defense of the United States.
We're being charged with 18 U.S. 2155.
2155 says that you intended to injure, interfere with, and obstruct the national defense.
Had we not charged them with 2155, their guidelines would have been just the 0 to 6 months.
What they had done is damaged national defense material, the fence, the perimeter fence.
Right next to the pole we cut down and then gently laid the fence on the ground. And after we put it on the ground, you know, and we said, now we have exposed this, and when the military comes, we will tell them that there is a crime being committed here and that this must be decommissioned, disarmed, and dismantled. When they came in, they came through this fence.
And they
now we had this fence open for them. Right. They could have really gone into the fence, but they just hit this fence, and this fence just flew in the air. And then they came in and they hit the right gate. We had the left gate wide open for them, and they hit the right gate.
Regardless of what they did in fact, all that was relevant was their intention.
Our testimony on the stand was very truthful, and that was that we came to the site to stop the crime of the United States government of threatening to use this weapon of mass destruction on the people of Iraq or on the axis of evil nations.
Their objective is to disarm America's nuclear capacity. That in itself gives you the intention as to why they're doing this.
We in no way intended to interfere with the national defense of the country.
A defendant acted with intent if the defendant acted when she knew that injury to the national defense would be the almost inevitable result.
It was not to injure the national defense. I mean, we know we can't injure the national defense. We know that we can't, succeed. After all, there are 10,000 nuclear weapons out there. This is just one.
The specific offense that they committed was vandalism of government property.
Now that is the fence. So we are charged 20 years in prison for the fence under sabotage and 10 years in prison for the fence under depredation of government property.
What are we really charged with? We asked that question 4 times, and it was never answered.
Well, there's no crime defined as sabotage.
But we're charged with sabotage. We'd never face, I'm facing 92 to 115 months in prison for this. You'd never do that if it weren't sabotage. That's one of the higher crimes of the nation.
Sabotage would be to, destroy something with the intention of rendering it useless or something like that. That's not what they were doing.
We have to prove they intended to obstruct the national defense. The national defense of the United States is that we have nuclear weapons because other people have nuclear weapons. So if their intention is for us not to have them, that would interfere or obstruct with the national defense of the United States.
In a courtroom, we have the defender and we have the prosecutor. They're both allowed to make their best argument, then either a judge or the jury make the decision about who's got the best argument.
Listen to what the judge said of us. He says, you cannot use in your defense morality, nothing about God, nothing about moral, nothing about ethics, political wisdom of the Minuteman III missile system, including but not limited to necessity, duress, choice of evils, privilege, justification, Nuremberg, mistake of law, good faith exception to mistake of law, international law violations, use of urgence violations, preemptory orders, 30 categories of law stripped.
I mean, Judge Blackburn's ruling on the international law thing was pretty clear and it was pretty good. It was like 32 pages, I think, and that won't get reversed, You can take that to the bank.
We truthfully felt we should be acquitted under international law. And the United States has to begin to accept it. Otherwise, every treaty we sign, every law that we sign into being, it's just going to be considered, a frivolous signature based on the fact that it's never adhered to.
International law under our own Constitution is the law of the land. So when they apply U.S. law, international law becomes part of that law. International law is primarily treaty law.
By treaty, that has no right to exist with the treaties that we have signed.
States and all these nuclear weapon states have not fulfilled their own promise that they would get rid of all nuclear weapons.
We believed that we could present our evidence with our international lawyers, with our expert witnesses, and that a judge would have enough respect for law that they would allow these defenses and would find us not guilty.
I testified before the judge, and the judge had asked all those questions about the legality, illegality of nuclear weapons under international law.
A Denver jury convicted them last month of injuring and obstructing national defense and of inflicting more than $1,000 of damage to government property. Prosecutors said they'll ask U.S. District Judge Robert Blackburn to sentence the nuns 5 to 8 years in federal prison and thousands of dollars in fines.
There's a commercial on television that comes to mind today. I think it's a MasterCard commercial. You know, cost of incarcerating someone in a minimum security federal prison may be $40,000 a year, but the doing what's necessary to uphold the rule of law is priceless.
You know, I want to make sure that I continue to love the judge, you know, and love the prosecutor, and love the people who are persecuting us.
We know this is a country where 1 in 32 adults are either in prison, on parole, or on probation. And we 3 are threatened that we will raise these numbers if incarcerated today for 6, 7, 8 years.
I think the idea that citizens should recognize threats to the country and try to find ways to help fellow citizens and leaders to address them with the urgency they deserve, that's called American democracy.
I encourage this movement to be as vocal as they want to be, but do it legally.
The reason they broke the law was to get attention.
Our conviction was that we had a responsibility to stop this crime.
In the story of civil disobedience, as Martin Luther King taught us, if you break the law and break the rules in order to get people to pay attention to an issue, sometimes that's the right thing to do morally.
You each have congressmen and senators.
We deal with them.
And we deal with them. Lobby them.
We do.
Lobby them.
That would be dangerous, wouldn't it?
We do, and we're in Washington. We live near Washington,
you know,
we're there.
When I spoke to them up there on the road, I said, you know, aren't there better things to do with your life? I mean, if you really wanted to do something about a system that is really wrong, You can't do it behind bars.
Well, you girls take care.
Thank you. God bless you.
Blessings to you. And I hope you don't get as much as they say you could.
All right. Thank you so much.
And if you don't go out and do it again.
I don't fear going to prison the rest of my life. I don't fear giving my life in any way. My life is going to be totally for working for a peaceful world.
We must live the rest of our lives in the best of the struggles. And living our lives in the best of the struggles wherever we are. And if that be prison or be out working with Ground Zero, Center for Nonviolent Action, that's where I will be.
I don't fear going to prison. I don't fear loss of freedom to move about. I don't even fear death. The fear that fills me is not having lived hard enough, deep enough, sweet enough with whatever gifts God has given me.
Think about what they did. They went through a fence.
This is just inappropriate.
It isn't as though they threatened to blow up this bomb.
It's bad manners.
There was never a time when they were threatening any physical damage to the missile.
It's bad Christianity.
They can't symbolically disarm a nuclear missile site.
They weren't putting anyone in any danger.
It's bad Bible interpretation.
They're Joans of Arc.
It's bad modeling for a just and orderly society.
They are the models that we all need to follow. We are the curators of life on earth. We hold it in the palm of our hand. We've never had to face anything like this in the history of the human race for 3 million years. And right now, we're at the nuclear crossroads. Will we destroy it, or will we save it?
Here, get the launch key.
We're going to war.
Violence, serious sin.
Weapon of mass destruction.
Weapons poised for immediate launch.
Unbelievably destructive.
Deliver us from evil.
Evil people.
The leadership of our nation
Addicted to weapons of mass
have gone
destruction.
mad.
Nuclear weapons.
Kills indiscriminately.
Blowing things up.
Barbaric.
Outrageous, destructive, dangerous.
Like a cancer.
Dominate and
A
control.
warrior nation.
Extreme, immoral acts.
Oh, God, teach us how to be peacemakers in a hostile world.
Wait a second.
Practice critical thinking.
The most important thing is our attitude toward nuclear weapons.
Seek the truth.
Are we continuing to consider them legitimate weapons of war?
Thou shalt not kill.
We seek the total elimination one day of nuclear weapons from the face of the earth.
The greatest power of freedom is to overcome hatred and violence.
The only way evil flourishes is for good people to do nothing.
We must shift the arms race into a peace race.
And turn the creative gifts of men and women to the pursuits of peace.
On mark, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark.
Was blind, but now I see.
I use my hands to till this land. With my heart I feed the poor, and I hunger for the end of war. Love is my intention. It's how I live my faith. This is my conviction.
I wanted a rocky road because I feel I've been on a rocky road and now I'm trying to straighten out the path. How much?
I use my will to heal mankind. With my soul I speak the truth, and I struggle for the end of war. Love is my intention, it's how I live my faith. This is my conviction.
I just want to say that we really are very ordinary people.
Whoa, I'm not here to change the world, but I fear it could change me. So I'm reaching out from the heart, 'cause that's what keeps me free, free. Oh, I live my life to plant the seeds. My path is to believe. We lay down our swords and war no more. Love is my intention.